Ladies and gentlemen, it's been quite a long 3 days, 3.5 days, and we've had a long journey. We've covered large swaths, if I may say, of knowledge, experiences, exchanged ideas, and I'm very happy to say that people are by and large happy that they came here. We started off looking at the film that I showed, and I think I want to end with that note, because that is, I think, a message which all of us, no matter where we come from, need to think about. It's not specific to Goa or India, for that matter. It's a global issue. And the issue is about how we have transformed ourselves from a society of mankind who believed in beliefs and moved over to a society which talks about haves and have-nots. As I mentioned in one of my remarks, that capitalism has failed in its present format to deliver, and I can see disconnects happening not just in India but in various parts of the world. But I'd like to confine myself today to the subcontinent. The number of poor are growing. The number of rich, in terms of numbers, is decreasing, but they're getting richer. And if you ask anybody how much money is enough for you, he will never give you an answer. Is it 10,000? Is it 1 lakh? Is it 1 crore, 10 crores, 100 crores, 1,000 crores? He may never achieve it, but he says, I need always to have more and more and more. So there is a cola ad called Dil Mange More. Okay? So there is no end to wants and desires in the present narrative. On the other hand, we heard from experts that there are finite resources, whether it is water, electricity, nature, wood, air, land, but we want more. So that was one stream of thought which sort of was an undercurrent, by and large, which prevailed over these 3 days. The other issue that came up, and I think the last session on security, or the last 2 sessions security tried to address, was this business of protecting the haves from the have-nots. You are somebody who has something, who has got some money, or you've got something. If you move away from the philosophical level to the practical level, today you're not respected for what you are, or what you think, or what you stand for. You are respected for how much money you have, how many cars you have, how much bank balance you have, and thereby access to power. Now, the funny part is that when you move from a have-not to a have, the same people change their attitude to you. So you all of a sudden arrive, so to speak. Now, looking at the developmental model, looking at capitalism structures, looking at the way we are developing and living our lives, we are apparently integrating more and more to the Western discourse. But culturally, we are not the Western discourse. Culturally, we are from a different planet, so to speak. We are from an Eastern or maybe an Asian kind of narrative and culture. So what exactly happens to us? We are torn between the two. Devdutt Patnaik used a phrase called Trishanku. We are stuck between the West and the East. And using a sentence of his, he says, rightly so, it's my own experience. You get an American to come down here, and she's going to go back to England. Oh my God, there's so many beggars in the streets, Oh my God, this doesn't work. There's no electricity here. God, how do you guys live? But if you take an Indian and he goes to the West, he will adapt very easily because we're used to this. So we're used to, I'm not justifying it, but we're used to the diversities, if I may use the phrase. But There's something new happening here. With the information age, with the age of television, social media, etc., we're also finding something else happening. The have-nots are now getting desperate for the haves. And as somebody mentioned, I think Mr. Pillai mentioned very eloquently, that they want everything now. They're not willing to wait. So they now want to snatch away from the haves and become the haves themselves. So when you look at homeland security, when you look at all those issues, to my mind as a layman, I'm not an expert in anything, I'm just a layman, I say it's nothing but protecting the haves from the have-nots. There's a problem here again. Being Indian, being, shall we say, from the subcontinent, we feel a sense of guilt, or we feel a sense of helplessness that there are so many have-nots, and how do we take care of them? So you have all the issues of philanthropy and corporate social responsibility, etc., etc. And we heard from some of the speakers alluding to what can perhaps be done. However, the numbers are daunting. 650 million people are going to be needing jobs. They need work. I don't know what the latest numbers of the workforce in the United States is, but I guess if you put all the workforces put together of the West, perhaps you would come to that number, I guess. The entire population in the United States is around 300 million, and I guess the workforce there should be around 50% of that, or 150 million, and then you take the whole of Europe. Where are you going to generate new jobs for 600 million people? The fact of the matter is, let's be realistic and pragmatic, you are not going to generate those jobs. So what do you see? You see a race for infrastructure, you see a race for electricity, you see a race for schools, you see a race for catching a bus, you see a race for catching a train ticket, you have a race for everything. And if you are not in a position to run and get there, then you're going to be left out. So those were some of the other undercurrents which basically I want to leave with you as thoughts as we leave the conference. And think about it, because the whole idea is to enrich ourselves and to understand from each other how we can move forward. So on the one hand, the have and have-nots are having a fight. And on the other hand, we have a system that is perhaps not able to deliver. The other thing which came out, and an interesting takeaway, is the fact that we follow the laws and the governance patterns which we adapted from the West. However, culturally, we feel very, very left out and feel very find that, for want of better language, that we do not seem to get the justice that we need. There is a sense of injustice. There's a sense of being left out. There's a sense of not being allowed the opportunity to be a part of this great mirage, this great have game. And so what does that person do? The person gets upset, he gets frustrated. Either he goes into suicide out of frustration, or he becomes a desperado, or just goes into general depression. So, I mean, these are all situations and stories which you're going to see. My advice to all of you is, you should be mentally prepared, take this on board, be compassionate about it, and keep this in mind. And I think this is the other message that came, that perhaps systems of governance and systems of delivery perhaps may not work unless we start looking at adapting them to the cultural discourse that is there in the subcontinent, rather than trying to just adapt something that comes from the West. At the same time, having done all this, I also mentioned that we are not going to sit in the Himalayas and start meditating and finish the rest of our lives like a Tibetan monk. That is not our solution. We have to live in this world, we have to live in this society, and function in a manner of a balance. And that balance is not a one-time decision, it's a constant battle of striking that balance, the way we speak, the way we conduct ourselves, the way we treat people, etc., etc. So a more compassionate and humane approach, a more understanding needs to become, which is very natural in our side of the world. The other issues that came up to my mind, which are again challenges, is besides the protecting the haves and have-nots, you also need to protect national infrastructure. And a lot of people talk about the blackout. To my mind, the report is not out as to why it happened. Somebody said they overdrew power. They've been overdrawing power for 10, 12 years. There were no blackouts. Somebody said it was a cyber attack. We haven't got a report on that. There was some solar activity, so I don't know whether there was an electromagnetic pulse which burnt out a few transformers, which did it. It has happened before in other parts of the world. We're not sure about that. But the point is that at the end of the day, I was interviewed by the New York Times, and I said, he said, what do you see? What's your take on this? I said, my take is only very simple. There's a huge demand for electricity. For a businessman, he sees a huge demand for electricity. And I see a great demand for electricity in this country. In fact, if I was a foreign investor, I'd start looking at ways and means how to invest in this and benefit from it. I don't see this blackout as a negative thing. I think it's a wake-up call for people to start putting up their socks. So, having said that, I think there was a lot of mention of that over the last couple of days. Our infrastructure needs to be strengthened. I must say that we had some very, very interesting participation from a lot of experts. I sort of particularly want to thank Ambassador Parthasarathy and Devdutt Patnaik and Mr. Pillai, and our speakers this morning, including Dr. Muzaffar Ahmed, and Mr. A. Roy, who especially came out for this session. I also want to thank Mr. Agarwal, Chairman of the Airport Authority, and Lieutenant Commander Mr. Singh Solanki, for really turning this power energy retreat into a security of infrastructure kind of thing as well. That gave us a very interesting ending and made us more aware of the situation as it stands. I'd also at the same time like to thank all of you for hanging in there. I think you guys have amazing stamina because frankly speaking, my brains are fried. There's so much information overload. But I think the bottom line at the end of the day is that this is a regulators and policymakers retreat. I mean, this retreat only happens because you are here. It doesn't happen if you're not here. And when you're looking at matters in the future, do bear in mind that security of energy infrastructure, which will come at a cost, needs to be factored in. Perhaps some commissions may like to factor in by having some suo motu action on security of infrastructure. I think that's very important, and I think it's in the national interest, it's the interest of the sector and the people. And I'm sure the regulators will pick up this view as well and look at that situation as it is. In conclusion, I just want to say that there are some very interesting issues out there, challenges for the regulators and policymakers. And the biggest challenge is, how do you fit a square peg into a round hole? You have from 1948 onwards to 1991 a power sector which grew from 1300 megawatts to, I don't know, 100,000 almost. And then from there onwards the journey started where you started getting the private sector involved. Now there are 2 points here I want to make. One is there is still huge discomfort about private sector getting involved in infrastructure. Governments are not very clear on what to do with private sector. How do you handle this animal? They're very happy. You want to buy power, buy it from a government company and forget about it, nobody can ask questions. But if you want to buy from a private sector, tender bulao, ask the credentials, 10 times get the FSA's clearance, do an audit check, do this, do that. Because nobody wants to, basically it's a discomfort. It's something that they're not comfortable with. So I think there is a little bit of thinking that needs to be done there. And the fact of the matter is that without our private sector investments, we could have gone on from 91 onwards. The only reason why we wanted private sector to come in is because we realized we are running out of resources. Now that having got the private sector in, the second problem we face is this Electricity Act has an inherent problem. And that problem is that we are talking about competition, we're trying to create a market. Actually what we're trying to do is defy gravity. Because no law of economics tells me how I can create market forces. without having, when you have shortages, when you have all kinds of difficulties in the system. So I think this is a challenge the Electricity Act has posed, where the intention is good, but implementation is becoming a problem. And if you look at all the narrative, we had I don't know how many of you got that workbook. We had prepared a special workbook for the master classes that we did this time. You find that government is also looking and seeking help. And I think the regulators have an additional responsibility of telling government what they should be looking at in terms of implementation. If you're going to have open access only for, as Mr. Ajay Mehta said, 0.1% of his consumers, then there's no point having open access. What kind of market are you trying to create? You're trying to create a market of haves. You're not creating real competition, not really giving consumers a real choice. And therefore, you need to sort that angle out. The other new, if I may use the phrase, fashion is competitive bidding. Let's competitively bid out everything. In spite of a Supreme Court decision which clearly says that competitive bidding is not mandatory, everybody wants to competitively bid everything. Because they think if you competitively bid it, then nobody can point fingers in. Now, the problem of competitive bidding, I'm going to just leave it with you in one case. One particular company did the competitive bidding for a 4,000 megawatt power project, a UNP. It today reported losses, I could be corrected by a few hundred crores, is around 4,000 crores is their loss. Why? Because the fuel that they assumed would come at X price is now coming at X plus 1, and they have already done a bid, they got the bid awarded to them at that fixed price. Now, you have a legal issue. Some people say you have to find a practical solution, give them what they want. But the others say, listen, the other people who are going to bid, if they knew that fuel is going to be a pass-through, maybe they could have got somebody else to bid for it. So what do? So competitive bidding is not a complete solution to the problem. My submission to the House is that. Well, it's nice to have competitive bidding, but again, Rajesh will bear me out. He runs the power exchange, the premium power exchange in India, and sometimes I'm asked this question, if I buy through the power exchange, I am absolutely fine because it's transparent. But the fact is it's all market clearing price principles. And then all of a sudden he gets an audit saying, but I had given you a sanction to buy power at 3 rupees, why did you buy it at 5 rupees? Now he has an audit explanation too that the power exchange has an algorithm, which is a market clearing price. But he has a lot of explanation too to the CAG report, and looking at the way the CAG is functioning, with due respects to the CAG, they really become imaginative. I think they're in the wrong profession. They should be in screenwriting or they should be in movie production. Because they're coming up with all kinds of assumed losses, which is very sensational. It makes for great TV time. But at the end of the day, we all know that nothing much is going to come out of it. And there are much more important issues we need to tackle. So ladies and gentlemen, these are some of the flavors. And I just wanted to sort of share with you that I'm very, very thankful to all of you who have come here at the 13th retreat. We are hopeful of getting out recommendations. I want to acknowledge the presence and the participation of the Power Secretary from Bangladesh, the Power Secretary from Pakistan, the delegation from Pakistan, from Bhutan, and other places. Thank you so much for coming. I would like to acknowledge the presence and the participation of industry, the regulators, policymakers, energy secretaries, chief ministers who have given their support, and of course, very importantly, all of you. I'd like to thank all of you, and I'd like to also thank our sponsors who have made this possible. The only appeal I have as an NGO, since we are a not-for-profit, is please dig in deeper to your pockets next year, so that we have even a better event. So that, yes, Rajesh, that includes you. You can smile. You'll be the managing director. And so we'll have a better event next year. This is the 13th event. A little bit of housekeeping to show you how we are functioning. We do 4 events a year. From this event, we move on to a multi-city event in September, which this year covers Delhi, Ahmedabad, Mumbai, and Kolkata. where the best technology in homeland security is brought from the West. Companies like Raytheon, Saab, and everybody else, and a whole bunch of guys come. We go to various cities, invite the police, invite the paramilitary, invite industry, invite organizations, and talk about what is the latest technology, whether they'd like to have more detailed information. We put the two together. The next event after that is on 28th of February and 1st of March. It's in Bangkok. It's called the Asia Energy Security Summit. This track 2 diplomacy event is done always outside India to give comfort to those Asian countries who would rather meet in a neutral territory. And we've had this, will be the third. We look at geopolitics, we look at energy security, the availability of fuel, the availability of coal, what is the future, how do we get resources out of landlocked Central Asia. We've had participation right from Jordan on one side to Japan on the other, including China, Russia, and everybody else in the Middle East. So I invite those of you who have inclination to look at energy security and geopolitics to attend it. And the final big event we really do is in London. It's called Securing Asia. It's on June 18th and 19th of 2013. We hold it right in the heart of London at the Queen Elizabeth Convention Centre, where we invite all 49 countries from Asia to come to London to talk about their challenges, their requirements, the difficulties they're having in terms of their homeland security, aviation, railways, ports, oil pipelines, tanks, power systems, that's on the energy side, and all other infrastructure they talk about, protecting public places, hotels, malls, the works, and we bring them together and we bring in the sellers of those equipments and the technology providers and those with the knowledge and best practices. So that's a melting pot of getting people together in that space. These are the 4 events we do, and just those of you who may not be familiar, we also do state-specific events in between. We've done events in the past with Haryana, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh. For the Northeast, we've done in Guwahati, Bhubaneswar, we've done Karnataka, we've done Delhi, and quite a few others. So we do state-specific events, and Bihar in particular I remember because that was a really challenging event. And we are very fortunate we've had the Chief Minister of the states participating. So it's at a high level, we discuss state-specific problems, we help them find solutions. Being a not-for-profit, they are also comfortable talking to us, and we move forward in that direction. So that's the story of IBPI and what we do, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being with us. We look forward to seeing you all next year as well. There's lunch, and there is a quick 10-second thank you ceremony which my friend Ashok is going to organize. I'm going to request the entire staff of IBPI and the group to come here quickly for a quick acknowledgement. Fast, move it. Come on. They're all dazed about it. Where's the, come on guys. We need a special invitation. Come on all of you, come on, quick. Prashant, come on, move. Oh my gosh. Bangalore, we're all here together. They all come here once in a year. And this is also an event which allows them to meet up with each other. What's wrong with you guys? You want a written invitation? Okay. So, Ashok, you're going to do the honors. Thank you.
I'd like to make she and her team, you stay here as comfortable as possible. If there are any slip-ups, kindly pardon us. We try to make you stay as comfortable as possible. We try to look into all matters, but you know, it's a big conference. Maybe we have slipped up somewhere, and please pardon us. Then Raghav, where is Raghav? Raghav. Pesci engineer. Where is Pesci? Dinesh. Dinesh is the one who has contributed heavily, you know, on these IPI awards. He worked relentlessly to make sure the awards become a successful ceremony, which it was. Wonderful, Dinesh. Anil. Where is Anil? Kamya. I think Kamya has the maximum load. Everybody used to ring up Kamya, this is the travel program, and next moment they will change.